The brine stung my nostrils, a familiar, unwelcome perfume. 12 miles out, the sea churned a bruised gray under a sky that threatened rain. This was my new office, the vast, indifferent expanse of the ocean, a far cry from the fluorescent hum of precinct interrogation rooms. Cole, that's what they called me once. Now I was just a shadow, a ghost haunting the edges of the city's forgotten docks, selling my silence to anyone who could afford it. Fishing boat 12 miles offshore, transfer point, bobbed like a cork, its hull scarred by 1,000 storms. It was a fitting monument to my own battered existence. A single figure stood silhouetted against the unforgiving horizon, their back to me. A man, he didn't turn as I approached, the planks groaning under my worn boots. The air thrummed with an unspoken tension, a silent prelude to the transaction. "You got it," my voice rasped, rough from disuse and cheap whiskey. The man nodded, a curt, almost imperceptible movement. He held out a heavy canvas bag. I took it, the weight settling in my gut like a stone. Inside, the rustle of paper, not money, not what I'd expected. I looked up, a question forming on my lips, but the man was already gone. A smaller, faster skiff had materialized from the mist, a phantom's whisper on the waves. He'd vanished as quickly as he'd appeared, leaving me alone with this anomaly. Back on shore, the city lights bled into the fog, a smear of artificial stars. I found a dimly lit bar, the kind where the air was thick with stale smoke and regret. The bag lay on the table between us, its contents spread out under the meager glow of a sputtering bulb. Photographs, not just any photographs, crime scene stills. The detail was unsettling. It was the signature, the unmistakable mark of a ghost I'd chased for years, a phantom I'd promised myself I'd catch. My hands trembled as I picked up one of the glossy prints. A jewelry store. Empty display cases, shattered glass like fallen diamonds. The alarm system disabled with surgical precision. No forced entry, no witnesses, just gone and then another. A gallery. Priceless artifacts vanished, leaving only dust motes dancing in the beam of a lone security camera that had somehow been overlooked. The police report, a crumpled thing I'd retrieved from a contact, detailed the same meticulous planning, the same unnerving tidiness. This wasn't a copycat. This was too close, too perfect. It was him. I drained my glass, the cheap liquor burning a familiar path down my throat. The city outside was a labyrinth of secrets, and I'd just been handed the first twisted clue. The man on the boat, the bag of evidence. It wasn't a payment. It was a message, a taunt, or perhaps a plea. The rain began to fall, a relentless drumming against the grimy window pane. Each drop seemed to echo the rhythm of my own fractured heart. The disgraced detective, the man who'd lost it all, and now the man who had to find his way back, not for redemption, not for glory, but because the monster I thought I'd buried was back, and he was ready to play again. The game was on, and this time I wouldn't let him win. The fishing boat 12 miles offshore, transfer point, was just the beginning. A stark, lonely stage set for a tragedy I knew all too well. My failure, his resurrection. The salt spray kissed my face, a rough, indifferent caress. My new office, the fishing boat 12 miles offshore, transfer point, reeked of diesel and desperation. This was a far cry from the fluorescent hum of precinct interrogation rooms, a far cry from the clean, logical lines of evidence. Here, everything was smeared, slicked with the grime of a life lived on the fringes. A colleague, a man whose face was a roadmap of hard living and short sleep, tossed me a worn duffel. It landed with a soft thud on the damp deck. "Heard you were looking for work, Cole," he rasped, his voice like gravel tumbling in a tin can. "This ain't exactly what you're used to, but it pays, and it keeps you busy." I nodded, my gaze sweeping the horizon. Busy, that was the word. Busy enough to drown out the whispers that followed me like a phantom limb. Busy enough to outrun the ghosts of unsolved cases. But this felt different. This felt like a homecoming I'd long since disowned. The duffel bag contained a change of clothes, a few days' worth of provisions, and a small, battered notebook. Standard issue for anyone needing to disappear or to find someone who had. I ran my thumb over the worn leather cover. Inside, my own cramped script documented the details of the serpent's meticulously orchestrated crimes. The ones that had driven me from the force, the ones that still coiled in the dark corners of my mind. "What's the score?" I asked, my voice low, barely audible above the groan of the engines. The colleague spat a stream of tobacco juice into the gray water. "Just a delivery, standard run, pick up, drop off. No questions asked, the less you know the better. He lowered his voice, leaning in conspiratorially. But word is, this one's sensitive, high value, you get me. I got him, sensitive. It painted a picture, one I knew all too well. This wasn't just about moving goods, it was about moving secrets. As the fishing boat 12 miles offshore transfer point chugged onward, a metallic glint caught my eye. Clinging to the railing just above the waterline was a small, tarnished silver charm. It was shaped like a coiled serpent. My breath hitched. It was identical to the one found at the last serpent crime scene. The one I'd meticulously catalogued, the one that had become my undoing. This couldn't be a coincidence. Not this far out, not on this boat. The serpent was dead. I'd seen the evidence, felt the finality of it, but the methods, the precision, the audacity, they were too familiar. I pocketed the charm, its cold metal a stark contrast to my suddenly clammy palm. My mind raced, piecing together fragments, trying to make sense of the impossible. The recent string of heists, each one a ghost of the serpent's past work, had been dismissed by the precinct as copycats. Clever, yes, but lacking the serpent's signature flair. But this charm, this was more than flair. This was a direct echo. The colleague watched me, his eyes narrowed. Something wrong, Cole? Just a memory, I lied, forcing a casual shrug. This sea air gets to you. He grunted, seemingly satisfied, and turned back to the helm. I retreated to the cramped cabin. The scent of brine and diesel thick in the air. The duffel lay open, the notebook beckoning. I pulled it out, the familiar way to grim comfort. I flipped to a fresh page, the ink bleeding slightly on the rough paper. Serpent, reborn, my hands trembled, a betrayal of the calm I was trying to project. Now the ghost of that music was playing again, and I was back on the stage whether I liked it or not. I traced the outline of the serpent charm with my finger. This wasn't about a delivery anymore. This was about settling a score. The tension in the air was palpable, a coiled spring ready to snap. The sea, the sky, the very air I breathed felt charged with an unseen threat. The salt spray kissed my face, a cold, unwelcome baptism. 12 miles offshore, the fishing boat, aptly named the Sea Serpent, pitched and rolled, a drunken dancer on a restless ocean. My knuckles were white against the worn railing. Each creak of the hull a whisper of the past. The air tasted of brine and something else, something metallic and sharp, fear perhaps, or the tang of impending disaster. They said the serpent's signature was his meticulous planning, his uncanny ability to weave through security systems like a phantom. The weight of it settled in my gut, a familiar, gnawing ache. A hulking figure emerged from the fog-choked deck, his face obscured by the shadow of his cap. He was the contact, one who'd lured me out to this desolate spot. His voice, a gravelly rumble, cut through the wind. I relate, Cole. The tide waits for no man. I shot back, my own voice tight. Or former detective, apparently. He grunted, unamused. Word is, I rest sniffing around again, the precinct's buzzing. Let them buzz, I said, my gaze sweeping the horizon. Nothing but an endless expanse of gray. This isn't their game anymore. This is his game, the man corrected, his tone hardening. And he's up the ante, the National Bank downtown, vault emptied, clean, no alarms tripped, no witnesses, just gone. My breath hitched. The National Bank, that was bold, audacious, a blatant challenge. The serpent had never targeted a place of such public prominence. This was a new level of arrogance, a new level of danger. When I managed to ask, the words feeling like lead on my tongue. Last night. They found it this morning. The same surgical precision, same lack of trace. On the vault door, too faint for the forensics boys to get a clean read, but it looked like a symbol, an Ouroboros, the Ouroboros. It was a detail I'd never shared, a detail buried deep within my own fractured memory. They're calling it the Serpent's Revenge. The press, the police, they're all convinced it's him, or someone playing him. He looked at me, his expression unreadable. And they're looking for Cole. The precinct chief himself is breathing down my neck, wants to know why interfering. The fishing boat lurched, throwing me against the railing. The rough wood scraped my skin, a sharp, grounding pain. Interfering, that was Rich. I was the one who'd lived with the serpent's ghost for years, the one who'd seen the patterns others missed, the one who'd been broken by his elusiveness. The bank's security system was state-of-the-art. A fortress of lasers and pressure plates. How could anyone bypass it so effortlessly? And the Ouroboros, that was the key. Only a select few had ever known about that symbol. They also found a note. The man continued, his voice dropping lower, tucked inside a safety deposit box. Addressed to I. Cole, my stomach plummeted. A note to me, this was no longer about mirroring the past, this was a direct confrontation. What did it say? He hesitated, his gaze fixed on the churning water. Just a single line, written in the same script as the symbol. The final act is yet to be written. Meet me where the water meets the sky. The water meets the sky, a riddle, a taunt, and a lure. The serpent or his imitator wanted me. They were playing a dangerous game, and I, Cole, was about to be forced onto the board. The stakes had just risen, higher than the waves crashing against the hull of the sea serpent. This wasn't just about catching a criminal anymore. It was about survival. It was about redemption. And it was about facing the ghost that had haunted my every waking moment. The fog seemed to thicken, swallowing the distant shore, and with it, any hope of a quiet retirement. The game was on. The salt spray stung my eyes, a constant, stinging reminder of the churning, indifferent sea. The deck of the fishing boat 12 miles offshore, transfer point pitched beneath my feet, a rhythm that did little to soothe the unease coiling in my gut. The transfer point, a fitting name for this liminal space, caught between the predictable shore and the vast, unpredictable deep, and between a past I couldn't outrun and a present that was rapidly becoming a nightmare. The stranger, a man whose face was as weathered and unreadable as the sea itself, had spoken in hushed, gravelly tones, handing me a slim, unmarked envelope. Inside, not money, but a single, dog-eared photograph. It was a grainy, black and white image, the kind you'd find tucked away in a forgotten shoebox. A group of people smiling, their faces indistinct in the dim light. Children mostly, and one woman, her gaze averted, a shadow of something I couldn't quite place. This was the serpent's calling card. The stranger had insisted, the signature of the ghost who'd haunted my career, the ghost I'd sworn to bury. Back in my cramped apartment, the stench of stale coffee and desperation clung to the air. I spread the photographs across my scarred kitchen table, a grim mosaic of stolen lives. The first heist, a high-end jewelry store. The second, a private art gallery. The third, a secure vault in the financial district. Each meticulously executed, each leaving behind a void where valuable items once resided. But the stranger's words and this new photograph felt like a key turning in a lock I'd long since rusted shut. I'd been chasing the serpent for months, years even before he'd vanished like smoke. He was a phantom, leaving no fingerprints, no witnesses, just a trail of carefully orchestrated chaos. The patterns were subtle, almost imperceptible, but I'd seen them. A specific brand of lock picked with uncanny precision, a unique method of disabling security systems, and always a chilling, almost artistic flourish left at the scene. A single white feather, a perfect origami crane, a perfectly preserved rose. The stranger claimed this was the serpent's true obsession, not the glittering baubles or the priceless canvases, but the faces in this picture. The victims of the heists, they weren't random. I pulled out my old case files, the ones I kept locked away, the ones that smelled of defeat and regret. The manila folders were brittle, the ink faded, but the details were seared into my mind. The jewelry store. The owner, a man named Sterling, had a daughter who'd been a classmate of one of the children in the photograph. The art gallery. The curator had a brother who'd been a prominent philanthropist, a man who'd been instrumental in funding a local youth center. And the financial district vault, it belonged to a firm that had handled the trusts for several families whose children were also in the picture. My breath hitched. It wasn't about the money. It never had been. The serpent wasn't a thief in the traditional sense. He was a collector, and his collection wasn't of material wealth, but of something else, something far more sinister. I sifted through the faded reports, my fingers tracing the names, the dates, the meager scraps of information I'd managed to glean all those years ago. The serpent's victims, a string of unsolved disappearances dating back over a decade, vanished without a trace. And the woman in the photograph, her face turned away, her identity unknown. He was the thread that connected them all, the phantom limb of this macabre puzzle. The pieces were starting to align, forming a picture that was far more disturbing than I could have imagined. The heists were not random acts of larceny. They were meticulously planned operations designed to retrieve something or someone. The serpent wasn't just back. He was escalating, and he was leaving me breadcrumbs, leading me deeper into his twisted game. I ran a hand over the rough surface of the photograph, my gaze fixed on the blurred faces of the children. A knot of guilt tightened in my chest. I'd failed them then, and if I didn't act now, I would fail them again. The wind howled outside, a mournful cry that echoed the turmoil within me. The fishing boat 12 miles offshore transfer point was just the beginning. The real transfer, the true exchange, was yet to come. The fishing boat 12 miles offshore. Transfer point groaned under the weight of the waves, a mournful sound that echoed the hollow ache in my chest. The air was thick with the metallic tang of brine and something else, something acrid and unfamiliar. I gripped the damp railing, gripped tight, the rough wood biting into my palm. This was it, the edge of everything I knew, the place where shadows stretched, and whispers became tangible threats. A figure emerged from the fog clinging to the deck, a silhouette against the bruised twilight. Not the informant I expected, but a different kind of ghost. Older, leaner, his face a roadmap of hard living and harder decisions. The man who'd once been my informant, now a fixture in the underbelly, a rat who'd always managed to scurry just out of reach. He'd vanished after the last job, leaving a trail of breadcrumbs that led nowhere. Until now. Cole, he rasped, his voice like gravel dragged across concrete. Fancy seeing you out here. Thought you'd hung up your badge for good. You know why I'm here, I said, my voice tight, betraying none of the tremor that ran through me. He was a loose end, a connection to the Phantom Killer, and seeing him now here on this god-forsaken vessel felt like a cruel joke played by fate. He chuckled, a dry, humorless sound, just like old times. He gestured vaguely towards the churning water. This is a dangerous game, Cole. You should have stayed on dry land. The heists, I pressed, ignoring his taunts. They're too clean, too precise, they're his signature. A flicker of something surprise, amusement crossed his face. You're still obsessed then? I heard about the new string of jobs, very artistic, not my style though, too much risk, not enough reward. Who's doing it? I demanded, taking a step closer. The boat lurched, throwing us both off balance. He steadied himself with a practiced ease I envied. Information like that comes at a price, Cole, a hefty one. He smirked, a flash of gold tooth glinting in the dim light. And I don't think you're in a position to pay. Try me. My hand instinctively drifted towards the worn leather of my jacket, where the weight of my old service weapon still felt like a phantom limb. He laughed, a genuine, unsettling sound this time. You're a fool if you think that thing will help you here. This isn't about brute force, Cole. It's about finesse, about knowing the angles. He paused, his gaze sharpening. You're looking at this all wrong. You think it's him, but what if it's someone using him? Someone with his playbook, but a better actor. The words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Using him? The killer I'd hunted, the phantom who'd vanished into the ether, was he a puppet? Had I been chasing a shadow cast by a larger, more sinister hand? He took a step back, his eyes narrowing. That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? He reached into his coat, and my muscles tensed, ready to spring. But instead of a weapon, he produced a small, tarnished silver locket. He flipped it open. Inside, a faded photograph of a woman. Her face was blurred, indistinct, but there was a haunting familiarity about her. He was the one who taught me, he said, his voice suddenly softer, almost reverent, how to disappear. She's gone now, but her students, they're still out there, and they remember her lessons. He snapped the locket shut. You're looking for a ghost, Cole, but the real danger is the living. Before I could process his words, a sudden violent lurch sent me stumbling. Get rid of him. My informant's eyes widened, a flash of fear replacing his usual bravado. He turned and scrambled towards the cabin, but it was too late. He crumpled to the deck, unconscious. Then a figure emerged. Not my informant. This man was taller, broader, his face obscured by the deepening gloom. He didn't speak, but his intention was clear. He advanced on me, the pipe swinging in a slow, deliberate arc. I reacted purely on instinct, diving to the side as the pipe whistled through the air where my head had been. The impact against the deck sent splinters flying. I scrambled to my feet, my hand now gripping the familiar weight of my weapon. The informant's words echoed in my mind. This isn't about brute force, it's about finesse. But finesse had just been replaced by raw, brutal intent. I fired. The attacker staggered, a surprised grunt escaping his lips, but he didn't fall. I rushed to my informant, checking his pulse. Faint, but there. He was alive, but the man with the pipe, he was gone, vanished as quickly as he'd appeared. And then I saw it. Tucked beneath his limp hand, almost hidden by the blood, was a small, folded piece of paper. My heart hammered against my ribs. This was it. The clue, the piece of the puzzle I'd been so desperately seeking. With trembling fingers, I picked it up, unfolded it. It It was a single, crudely drawn symbol, a stylized raven, its wings spread wide, and beneath it, scrawled in a shaky hand, a single word. Mine. A wave of nausea washed over me. This wasn't just a copycat, this was something else, something far more personal, and the symbol. It was a twisted echo of something I'd seen before, something I'd tried to forget. The fog seemed to thicken, pressing in on me, suffocating. The sea's relentless rhythm was no longer a soothing balm, but a chaotic roar. I was adrift, not just on this boat, but in a sea of my own making. The salt spray stung my face, a welcome, brutal awakening. The rocking of the fishing boat 12 miles offshore transfer point was a familiar, if unwelcome, lullaby. It was the kind of place where secrets went to die or to be born anew. The air hung thick with the stench of brine and decaying fish, a perfume of desperation. I'd been brought here by a cryptic message, a whisper carried on the wind that promised answers. Answers to the phantom echoing in my mind, the ghost of the killer I'd let slip through my fingers. The deck beneath my worn boots creaked with every swell. A lone figure, cloaked in the anonymity of the pre-dawn gloom, weighted by a stack of coiled ropes. Not the usual informant, this one. There was a stillness about them, an unnerving composure that prickled the hairs on my neck. My hand instinctively drifted towards the worn leather of my jacket, a ghost of a habit. "You're late," the figure rasped, their voice like pebbles grinding together. No preamble, no pleasantries, just the cold, hard truth. "The sea doesn't care for schedules," I replied, my own voice a low rumble. I scanned the horizon, the faint smudge of land a distant promise. "What have you got for me?" The figure gestured with a gloved hand towards a canvas-covered lump near the stern. "The package, you wanted proof." I approached the lump, my steps deliberate. The canvas was taut, outlining something heavy, something rectangular. With a tug, I pulled it back. Beneath lay a polished wooden crate, intricately carved with a pattern I recognized with sickening clarity. It was the same swirling, knot-like motif that had adorned the victim's belongings, but this was different. This wasn't a trophy. This was a meticulously crafted vessel. "What is this?" I breathed, tracing the carvings with a trembling finger. The wood was smooth, cool to the touch, yet it felt alive, charged with a malevolent energy. "A testament," the figure said, "to an architect's vision, to a legacy, to what was stolen." Stolen. The word hung in the air, heavy with unspoken accusation. My mind flashed back to the case files, the countless hours poring over details, the dead ends. The killer's signature had been the meticulous planning, the almost artistic execution of their crimes. But there was always something missing, a piece of the puzzle that eluded me. "Who are you?" I demanded, my gaze snapping back to the cloaked figure. "A custodian," they replied, "of what was left behind, of what you overlooked." Overlooked. The word was a lash. I had overlooked so much. My own hubris, my desperate need to close the case, had blinded me. The detective who had once prided himself on his sharp eye, on his ability to see what others missed, had been the one to miss the most crucial detail of all. "These heists," I began, my voice tight. "They're not random, they're targeted." "Precisely," the figure confirmed. "Each stolen item, each carefully chosen location. It's a narrative, a reclamation." My eyes darted back to the crate. I ran my hand over the carvings again, the familiar pattern now screaming a different language. It wasn't just a symbol, it was a key. A key to what? To a vault, to a memory. The sheer precision of the work spoke of a craftsman, an artist, and the motive, it wasn't greed, not entirely. It was about something lost, something they were trying to get back. "The victims," I murmured, the pieces beginning to click into place with a terrifying finality. They weren't random either. They were connected to the perpetrator, to each other. The figure remained silent, a statue against the churning sea. Their silence was an affirmation. I remembered the faint, almost imperceptible tremor in the hand of one of the victims' families, the subtle way the art dealer had avoided my gaze. All small things, easily dismissed in the heat of a complex investigation. But now, in the stark light of this revelation, they loomed large. It's not just a signature. It's a signature of ownership, and this, I tapped the crate, this wasn't just about catching a criminal. This was about a vendetta, a meticulously constructed plan to right a perceived wrong, and the orchestrator, the ghost I'd chased for years, was finally revealing their face. They're not just stealing things, I realized, the words tasting like ash. They're reclaiming a life that was taken from them. The fog, which had seemed to recede, now felt like a shroud, wrapping around the fishing boat 12 miles offshore transfer point. The sea's rhythm, once a comforting sound, now felt like a countdown. The architect of this carefully orchestrated chaos wasn't just a killer, they were a victim, twisted by a grievance that had festered for years. And I, in my haste to find a killer, had failed to see the deeper wound. The perpetrator wasn't just a shadow from my past, they were a reflection of what happens when justice is denied. And their next act, I suspected, would be the most devastating of all. The salt spray on my face was a familiar sting, a ghost of countless nights spent chasing shadows on dark slick with brine. But this time, the chill wasn't just the ocean's breath. It was a premonition, a cold dread that had been my unwelcome companion since the first whisper of their return. Its name, stenciled in faded white paint, was a cruel irony. Transfer point. Transferring what? Hope, innocence. My sanity, I gripped the rusted railing, gripped tight. The fog, a creeping enemy I'd wrestled with before, was starting to coil around the boat, blurring the edges of reality. It muffled the groan of the hull, the slap of waves against the weathered wood, turning the vast expanse of the sea into a claustrophobic stage. Not the clumsy, hurried movements of a fisherman caught in a storm, but the deliberate grace of a predator. My breath hitched. This was it. But I'd believed, foolishly, that the arena would remain distant, impersonal. The figure approached the edge of the deck, silhouetted against the faint glow of a distant lighthouse. The air grew heavy, thick with an unspoken threat. I could feel the hum of adrenaline, a traitorous tide rising within me, urging me to act, to storm the deck, to demand answers. But years of training, years of knowing when to observe, when to wait, held me captive. Then a voice, low and raspy, cut through the drone of the engines. Cole came. It wasn't a question. It was a statement of fact, delivered with an unnerving calm. I knew that voice. My gaze sharpened, trying to pierce the gloom. The figure raised a hand, not in greeting, but in a gesture that was both a warning and an invitation. In that hand, glinting dully, was something I recognized with a sickening lurch. A locket. Not just any locket, but the locket. The one I'd given my sister years ago before she... It was identical, down to the tiny, almost invisible scratch near the clasp. A copy, perhaps, or was it? She always did have a flair for the dramatic. The voice continued, a dry amusement coloring the words. Said it was a reminder of what I lost. My mind reeled. This wasn't just about the heists anymore. This wasn't about a phantom killer mirroring my failures. This was a direct accusation, a gauntlet thrown. They knew about Sarah. How could they know? The details of his disappearance had been buried, twisted, lost in the chaos of my own unraveling. I think I can outrun what I left behind, Cole. The figure took a step closer, and the fog seemed to part, revealing a face I didn't recognize, yet felt a perverse familiarity with, of debts. And I have a very large one. The figure gestured towards the locket, then towards the vast, indifferent sea. This is where it all began, isn't it? The water. The feeling of being utterly, irrevocably alone. The words landed like stones, each one chipping away at the fragile defenses I'd constructed. The transfer point. It wasn't about moving stolen goods. It was about transferring something far more precious, far more painful. My past, my guilt, my sister. You've been so busy chasing ghosts, Cole, the voice purred, you forgot about the living, about the ones who remember, the ones who suffer. A sudden realization, sharp and brutal, pierced through the fog of my confusion. It was a message delivered with a cruel, intimate understanding of my own brokenness. This was someone who had lived in the periphery of my past, someone who had witnessed my fall, and now was using the fragments of my life to reconstruct their own twisted narrative. The stakes hadn't just been raised, they'd been redefined. They weren't after my reputation anymore. They were after my soul. And they were using Sarah's memory, her ghost, as the bait. The salt spray kissed my face, a familiar sting that did little to clear the haze from my mind. 10 hours since that chilling whisper in the alley, since the silhouette melted back into the night, leaving behind only the phantom scent of ozone and the echo of a taunt. 12 miles, the voice had rasped, a sound like gravel dragged across bone. The usual place, my gut twisted. It was a place I'd tried to bury, a place that festered in the dark corners of my memory. Now it was the stage for a twisted play, and I was the reluctant lead. The fishing boat, a rusted hulk named the Siren's Song, bobbed on the restless, slate-gray water. Its engine chugged a mournful tune, a discordant counterpoint to the slap of waves against its hull, 12 miles offshore. The transfer point. It was always about the transfer. I scanned the horizon, my eyes aching from the glare of the sun on the water. Nothing but an endless expanse of blue and the distant, hazy line where sea met sky. My hands, slick with the damp chill, gripped the worn leather of my bag. Inside, the tools of a trade I'd abandoned, but which now felt like the only language I understood. A coil of thin, high-tensile wire, a small, powerful flashlight, and the worn photograph, its edges softened by countless touches, of a face I could no longer bear to look at directly. The perpetrator knew me. They knew my history, my failures, my deepest wounds. This wasn't about money or even about the thrill of the chase. This was personal, a game of cat and mouse played out on the board of my own shattered past. The heists, each one a mirror image of the serial killer's signature, were a deliberate echo, a taunt. They wanted me to see. They wanted me to remember. A flicker of movement. A small skiff, barely visible against the swells, cut through the water, heading directly for the siren's song. My breath hitched. This was it, the moment of truth or the prelude to another agonizing failure. As the skiff drew closer, I could make out two figures hunched low. One steered, the other scanned the horizon with a practiced vigilance that sent a shiver down my spine. They were professionals. This was orchestrated. My mind raced, piecing together the fragments. The precision of the heists, the almost surgical removal of valuables, the deliberate lack of collateral damage, it all pointed to someone with a deep understanding of chaos theory, of domino effects. They didn't just plan the act, they planned the aftermath. They planned my reaction. The skiff nudged against the fishing boat, a soft bump that vibrated through the hull. The other remained, a silent sentinel. My gaze fixed on the one who boarded. Tall, lean, moving with an unnerving grace. I couldn't see their face, hidden by the shadow of a wide-brimmed hat. This was my chance. I'd spent the last few hours on this desolate vessel, the scent of fish and brine clinging to everything, setting the stage. A loose plank near the main cargo hatch, a strategically placed coil of rope, a fishing net artfully draped to snag unwary feet. Small things, things that, in the heat of the moment, could become insurmountable obstacles. The figure moved towards the cabin, their footsteps unnervingly light. I'd chosen this location, this transfer point, not just because it was their chosen rendezvous, but because it was a place of transition. A place where things moved from one state to another, often unseen. A fitting stage for the confrontation I knew was coming. I heard the creak of the cabin door, a guttural sigh from the old wood. They were inside, searching, looking for what? For the loot from the last heist, or for me? A sudden noise, a metallic clatter from the stern. My head snapped around. The figure had emerged from the cabin, holding something small and gleaming, a lock pick. They were attempting to bypass the auxiliary storage locker. My trap. My hand instinctively went to the pistol in my bag. What if this was exactly what they wanted? What if the trap was already sprung, and I was merely a pawn in their elaborate game? I'd been so sure, so focused on the mechanics of the chase, that I'd forgotten the most crucial element, the mind behind the madness. The figure turned, their head tilting as if listening, but I felt it. A gaze, sharp and dissecting, landing directly on my hiding place. They knew I was here. They had brought me here, and the trap wasn't for them, it was for me. The salt spray kissed my face, a cold, unwelcome greeting. 12 miles offshore, the fishing boat, aptly named the Siren's Song *, groaned beneath the weight of the waves. Its hull, a patchwork of rust and peeling paint, seemed to whisper forgotten tales of the sea. This was the place I'd tried to erase, the ghost that haunted my waking hours and stalked my dreams. Now it was the designated stage, and I, Cole, was the unwilling protagonist in a drama I'd hoped was long over. The air hung thick with the metallic tang of brine and something else, something acrid and unsettling. The wind whipped my coat, a relentless, unseen hand trying to push me back to shore, back to the comfortable oblivion I'd so desperately sought. But oblivion was a lie. It never truly let you go. Not the hulking silhouette of the dockworker from my nightmares, but something leaner, more precise. The stranger. He moved with an unnerving grace, his steps silent on the slick, weathered planks. The moonlight, a sliver of bone in the bruised sky, glinted off something metallic in his hand. "You came, Cole." The stranger's voice was a low rumble, barely audible over the churning water. It was a voice I hadn't heard in years, a voice I'd forced myself to forget. My breath hitched. The puzzle pieces, scattered and jagged, began to coalesce into a horrifying picture. "It's over," I said, my own voice rough, a stranger to my ears. He chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. Over, my dear Cole, it's just beginning. He raised the object in his hand. It wasn't a gun. Not in the conventional sense. It was a wickedly sharp harpoon, its barbed tip gleaming. My gaze flickered to the cargo containers stacked precariously on the deck. The same type of containers that had been used in the heists. The same meticulous planning, the same unnerving signature. The warehouse jobs, the gallery theft. It was you. The question hung in the damp air, a fragile thing. Who else would possess such artistry? He gestured with the harpoon, a flourish of morbid pride. You gave me the blueprint, Cole. You showed me how the city's underbelly truly worked. And then you disappeared, leaving me to refine my craft. My stomach clenched. It all flooded back. I'd seen that precision before, not in the field, but in the sterile, detached way the perpetrator had described his work. He hadn't been a killer, he'd been an artist. And I, in my misguided attempt to understand, had inadvertently provided him with his canvas. You twisted it. I spat, my hands clenching into fists. You took what I was trying to do and made it into this mockery. Mockery? It's evolution, Cole. You were playing checkers, I'm playing chess. And you, my friend, have just walked your king into checkmate. He lunged. The harpoon whistled through the air, a deadly arc aimed at my chest. I ducked, the barbs tearing through the fabric of my coat, missing flesh by inches. The impact of the near miss sent a tremor through me. This wasn't just about catching a criminal, it was about facing the embodiment of my greatest failure. I scrambled for a discarded coil of rope, my fingers fumbling with the thick fibers. The stranger advanced, his movements fluid, predatory. He was faster than I'd anticipated, his reach with the harpoon unnerving. He feinted left, then swung right, the barbed tip whistling past my ear. The salty wind seemed to carry his cruel laughter. You always were too slow, Cole. He taunted, too hesitant. You let your empathy cloud your judgment. I, on the other hand, understand the necessity of decisiveness. He lunged again, and this time I met his charge. I swung the heavy rope, aiming for his legs. It connected with a thud, momentarily throwing him off balance. He stumbled, his harpoon sinking into the wooden deck. It was my chance. I lunged forward, tackling him. We hit the deck with a jarring impact, the wooden planks protesting beneath our weight. The harpoon, dislodged from the deck, clattered across the surface. He was wiry, surprisingly strong, his body a coiled spring of aggression. We wrestled, the boat rocking violently, threatening to toss us into the unforgiving sea. His hands found my throat, his grip like a vise. I clawed at his wrists, my vision beginning to blur. The acrid smell intensified, mingling with the metallic scent of my own exertion. This was the man I'd let slip through my fingers, the monster I'd helped create. You should have stayed retired, Cole, he rasped, his breath hot against my face. This is where you belong, with the rest of the forgotten things. A wave crashed over the deck, drenching us both. I saw the harpoon still lodged in the deck, its barbed end glinting menacingly. A desperate plan formed, sharp and dangerous. With a surge of adrenaline, I twisted, throwing him off balance. He scrambled to retrieve the harpoon, but I was faster. I grabbed a heavy metal gaff hook, its sharp prongs a stark contrast to the harpoon's barbs. Not this time, I growled, the words a raw testament to my fury. The battle wasn't just physical, it was a reckoning, a confrontation with the ghosts of my past, the specter of my own inadequacy. And on this lonely fishing boat, miles from shore, I would either finally lay them to rest, or be swallowed by the sea along with them. The spray stung my eyes, a sharp, metallic tang of salt and something else, fear. The fisherman, a hulking silhouette against the bruised twilight, grunted as he hit the water. The fishing boat 12 miles offshore, transfer point, pitched violently beneath my feet, the waves a relentless, gnawing beast at its hull. I didn't wait to see him surface. My focus narrowed to the glinting metal in my hand. The harpoon. The weight of it was familiar. A ghost of its former burden, yet now it felt like an anchor, pulling me down to the very depths I'd been trying to escape. The fisherman's words, a low growl before his submersion, echoed in the cavern of my skull. He didn't do it, Cole, never him. He didn't do what? The question was a phantom limb, an ache where a memory should be. The fisherman, the heists, the killer, it all swirled, a tempest in my gut, mirroring the fury of the sea. I scanned the horizon, the endless expanse of gray and black. No other boats, no lights, just us and the indifferent ocean. My breath hitched. He'd been right, hadn't he? The killer. The one I'd chased for years, the phantom who danced through my life, leaving a trail of meticulously executed crimes and a void where justice should have been. I'd seen the pattern, the signature, so clear it was etched behind my eyelids, and then, nothing. A sudden, abrupt silence that had followed me like a shadow. The fishing boat 12 miles offshore transfer point groaned. The engine sputtered, a dying gasp. I gripped the harpoon, its rough wooden shaft slick with seawater. My knuckles were white. My thoughts, usually a chaotic jumble, were suddenly sharp, crystalline. He didn't do it, Cole. Who was he? The man I'd arrested? The one I'd been so sure of, the one who'd confessed under a pressure I now questioned? Or was it someone else? A pawn? A decoy? I stumbled towards the cabin, my boots sloshing in the water that had pooled on the deck. The door creaked open, revealing a dim interior, smelling of brine and diesel. On a small table lay a worn, leather-bound journal. My heart hammered a new rhythm against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat of sudden realization. I reached for it, my fingers trembling. The pages were filled with precise, almost surgical handwriting, dates, locations, figures, and descriptions of the heists. Not just the recent ones, but the ones from years ago. The very heists that had defined my downfall, the same meticulous planning. But here in this journal, the author wasn't boasting about his own genius. He was documenting someone else's, someone he'd been watching, someone he'd been protecting. A name appeared, scrawled in a different ink, a hurried addition at the bottom of a page detailing the first heist I'd investigated, Sealers. Sealers, a former informant, a ghost I'd dismissed as unreliable, a junkie with a penchant for tall tales. The journal detailed Sealers's observations, his growing unease as he witnessed the crimes unfold, realizing the true perpetrator was someone far more dangerous than the obvious suspect. He'd tried to warn me, the fisherman had said, tried to steer me away from the trap. The fisherman, he wasn't a criminal, he was Sealers, and he'd been trying to tell me. I scrambled back onto the deck, the cold wind whipping my hair. The fisherman was gone, vanished into the churning sea, a sacrifice to ensure the truth would surface. The harpoon felt heavy in my hand, no longer a weapon but a symbol of my blindness, my hubris. The sea had swallowed Sealers, but it couldn't drown his message. The journal, the meticulous notes, the damning evidence, it was all here waiting. The killer was still out there, a phantom I'd almost caught, a phantom I had the chance to finally expose. The resolution wasn't just about solving the heists, it was about finally seeing what had been in front of me all along, a truth I had been too afraid to acknowledge. The fishing boat 12 miles offshore, transfer point, bobbed in the vast, unforgiving ocean, a silent witness to the end of one chapter and the dawning of another. My real work was just beginning.